The Rangers and Twins faced off this weekend in Arlington, and that sure was one of the baseball series that happened.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the World Series champion Texas Rangers and Minnesota Twins. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan covering this team for 11 seasons, including all 6 as the founder and host of this podcast. Joining me today, host of Locked On Twins, the great Brandon Warren. Brandon, how are you doing today?
Hey, it's good to be here, and it's good to be recapping a series where the Twins took 3 of 4.
Yeah, I would say same, but for me, less ideal. For sure. Before we get into today's show, this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code, all lowercase, LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Now, the Rangers looked, not great this weekend. We're able to avoid the opportunity by the Minnesota Twins with a weird, wacky walk-off on Sunday late afternoon. But still, overall, a very discouraging series for the Rangers, whose playoff hopes were pretty much already dead heading into this 4-game series. And after this are about as dead as they could be. Just absolutely zero hope for the playoffs at this point. But the Twins are in a much different spot. They need every single one of these games. They are in a very, very tight division race, in a division that, I'll be honest, I picked the Twins to win in a landslide this year, in a division that I did not expect being this good or nearly this deep. What have you seen from the Central this year that maybe most folks were sleeping on heading into the year, Brandon?
Well, the Guardians had a strong enough start that they've just been kind of able to rest on that. And if I'm completely honest, I don't really buy them as a contender. Offensively, I saw over the last month, they're 29th in weighted runs created plus. They've been like a bottom 5 rotation in MLB this season. It does not add up to a contender to me. Meanwhile, the Royals are I think they're ahead of schedule technically, just based on the fact that they were so bad last year. And granted, Bobby Witt Jr. taking a huge leap forward helps quite a bit. And the pitchers they have, whether it's Seth Lugo or Michael Wacha, in addition to Brady Singer taking a step forward, each of those guys has been able to either ward off the regression you'd expect from somebody who strikes out 7 batters per 9, or has managed to just reinvent themselves in a way that has made this team at least a viable contender for the playoffs, if not outright the division. Now, as far as the Twins, it's just depth and depth and depth, because right now, Carlos Correa and Byron Buxton are on the injured list. You didn't see either of them in this series, and the Twins still took 3 of 4 because Carlos Santana is hitting now. Christian Vasquez is hitting now. And Willie Castro is the team's all-star. He's been doing some things. It's pretty wild that they've used this depth to get to this point, because if they had everyone healthy, I think that's where running away with it, like you suggested before the season, would probably have been in play if they would have kept even just marginally healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this year, I did not foresee the depth being such a strength of the Twins. I really thought that, I felt good about Byron Buxton heading into this year in terms of his health, as good as you can feel about Byron Buxton in terms of his health. But I thought if he and Correa were healthy and, playing to their capacity, they would be the ones to carry this team. And so far, I mean, Correa's played 75 games this year. Buxton's played 90 games this year. They've both been, fantastic players, but it really hasn't been those two guys that have been carrying the weight. It's been a little bit of everybody, including, like you mentioned, Carlos Santana, who was just an absolute monster in this series and got just the second home run that Kirby Yates has given up all season. The other, of course, to other former, I guess, AL Central great, where was it? Paul DeJong was the first home run that Yates has given up this year. And this was the first blown save for Kirby Yates this year. One of the few bright spots this season for the Texas Rangers has been Kirby Yates, but the Rangers were able to overcome that and not saddle him with the loss in this one. What has Santana brought to this Twins squad?
Well, first base, the Twins could have probably filled first base internally by kind of throwing some things together between Jose Miranda and Alex Kirilloff. And I mean, last year in their playoff win, the first one that kind of broke the seal. Do you remember who was playing first base in that game?
Actually, was it Joey Gallo?
No, Donovan Solano. So literally piecing together first base was more than an option. And people were like, oh, go get Rhys Hoskins. And they didn't. They went cheaper and got Carlos Santana. And outside of his tough start, and then, when a guy that age starts off slow and you get that immediate, is he washed conversation, he has turned it on and then some. He's brought, easy for me to, he has brought with him an immense amount of stability at first base, and he's playing very good defense. He's been just a very consistent, steadying presence, and I think you probably can't overstate what he's brought to the table across the board in terms of contributions on a team that has so desperately lacked that consistency in the lineup, in the clubhouse, in the day-to-day stuff. So it's really hard to overstate what he's meant to this team. And beyond that, he's producing. He's got his highest weighted runs created plus and highest FanGraphs WAR since 2019. And 2019 is not that long ago, but it's still a while in terms of baseball lifespans. So it's really good to see him turn back the clock. And he looks like he is about as good as I've seen him since the days he was catching with the Guardians way back in the day.
Yeah, he definitely was a monster this series with a big 3-run home run. I believe that was on Friday's game. And then the solo shot off of Kirby Yates as well. But I want to talk about Pablo Lopez. This year it was really kind of fallen off compared to where he was last year, where I thought he was one of the best pitchers in baseball. And I mean, that start in the playoffs last year against Houston, I mean, he looked absolutely fantastic. What has been the deal with him this year? I know the Rangers got to him earlier in Minnesota, but in this game, they were able to get some base runners, but Lopez was able to pitch himself out of jams while not having his best strikeout stuff. What's been the deal with Pablo this year in the regression?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the thing I see most is he's giving up a few more home runs and not striking out quite as many batters. But in terms of like overwhelmingly obvious things he's doing that have made him worse, it's just like inning by inning sequencing stuff. Giving up the home runs have led to an inflated ERA. And I mean, a home run here or there could bump your ERA from 3.66 last year to 4.47 this year. WHIP is about the same it's been. A strikeout or two more would be nice. But again, at the end of the day, he kind of is who he's been. And it's just kind of, gone sideways on him. I'm pulling up some data because I want to make sure that I have, his individual pitch mix stuff and how that's varied, because I do think that, his breaking ball is his breaking stuff has allowed a 474 slugging percentage this year, as opposed to a 303 last year, which is to say his sweeper, most notably, has not been as good as it was last year. 466 slug on it this year, 287 last year. So he has struggled to locate the sweeper, and when he has located it in the strike zone, it's getting smacked around. So it's it's a cat and mouse game, and he's trying to figure out what's next. And in general, I mean, he'd still start game one for me in the playoffs if they started today. I really like Bailey Ober. I think he's doing a tremendous job. And if Joe Ryan was healthy, he was having a really nice season too. But at the end of the day, Pablo is their most talented and accomplished starting pitcher. It's just a little frustrating to not see the results match the peripherals.
So do you think that's going to turn around in the playoffs? You're still starting him game one. Do you feel like, is that kind of a resume thing, or a kind of a feeling that, once the lights are bright, he's going to get back to being that elite version of himself?
I feel like it's, if you look at different spurts of the season, he's had the numbers you've kind of grown accustomed to. So for me, it would come down to, I think the adjustments he needs to make are somewhere in there, whether they've been made already or they're in the process of being made in terms of between starts and that sort of thing. I think that the best is yet to come for him still this season. And if I'm gambling on a game one starter, I want my most physically capable, competent pitcher who's done it, and not that long ago. I mean, again, you could start Zach Greinke and say, oh, well, look at all he's accomplished. He also throws 84 miles an hour. But at least with Lopez, like it wasn't that long ago that he was also, tremendous. And the velo still looks about where it needs to be. And so, he was popping 96, 97 towards the end of the start on Sunday. So I still think the best is yet to come for him. And I am doing a little bit though of that kind of gut feel thing when it comes to, who I'm going to start on a game one of the playoffs if everything lines up right.
Yeah, and speaking of game one of the playoffs, this is not where the Rangers are going to be this year. Coming up, we're going to talk about how Brandon sees this team, what surprised him about where they are right now, right after this word from our sponsors. This show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active users. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive a $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks. Run your game. Now, this Rangers team is coming off a World Series. If you are watching on YouTube, you can see the little pennant right there behind me, and you can see part of a little fancy plaque commemorating the nice things that happened for my baseball team last year that unfortunately will not be happening for my baseball team this year. And Brandon, I'm curious if you have watched much of the Rangers this year, or since May, when this team was still had a winning record and this team was had hope in life and joy, and how far they've fallen. How are you viewing this Rangers team? Is this kind of a surprise? Or did you think last year when they won the World Series, they were going to, continue to be that good? Or did you kind of see a little bit of a fall off coming?
Well, I mean, I still think the components are there. It's just a matter of, sometimes you need things to really come together at the right time to win a World Series. I mean, at any point in the last however many years have you said the Texas Rangers are the best team in Major League Baseball right now? They won the World Series, and so they were the best in that moment and best at the end. They were standing at the top of that hill once the playoffs ended. But, the best, most stacked team doesn't always win, and that's why, we don't have to worry about the Dodgers winning it every year, which is actually kind of nice, frankly. But, I look at the pieces here, of all if you could have had the guys DeGrom and Scherzer healthy, the offense, even where there have been struggles with the young guys, Langford and even Adolis Garcia, slumping a bit and all that. There's still the pieces in place for this to be a very good, sturdy, strong ball club. And it's just a matter of, sometimes things just don't go your way. Sometimes things just slide a little bit. It's not as though I'd feel like this team is without hope. It's just that you get to this point of the year and all the things that you keep thinking need to happen for things to turn around just kind of run out of time to happen. And so, yeah, would it be great if they could get all their guys healthy and, get their butts in gear and get back to the playoffs and see what happens? Yes. But Houston doesn't stop for anybody. Seattle stops on offense, but not on pitching. And so it's sometimes you run out of time to find your team's identity. And I think generally speaking, if this 40-man roster was healthy, you wouldn't see too many better 40-man rosters in all of MLB, but it just hasn't come together the way they thought it would. And again, sometimes that's just what happens.
Yeah, I mean, injuries really played a big part in this season. I mean, Josh Jung going down after the 4th game and missing more than half the season. I believe 84 games is how many he missed in total. I mean, Josh Smith was a revelation coming up in his stead. Should have been an all-star over Willie Castro. Absolutely. Don't know why the hometown kid didn't get that bump there, but really frustrating because I don't know if Josh Smith is going to have a first half like he had this year ever again. I hope so. I hope it's legit. The peripherals aren't quite as flattering as the overall numbers were in that first half, and he's kind of fallen off a little bit as of late. But I mean, missing Josh Jung for that extended period, and people forget about Evan Carter, who played 45 games this year, and about half of those games he was playing through a back injury that he probably shouldn't have been. It was the
Mhm.
second time in his career he's had a back injury. He had his first full pro season that knocked out 2/3 of his season. He's having it again at age 21, which Chris Young says it's not going to be something that's, long term and recurring. But I mean, how can it not be that the
Mhm.
comps to Grady Sizemore after him having that first back injury at 18 were like, oh, let's hope he doesn't have those recurring injuries. But it might end up being the case and only getting, 45 games out of Carter and not getting as much offense as you anticipated out of Langford. I mean,
Mhm.
defensively and on the base paths, he's been so much better than I anticipated. But having down years across the board from basically everybody outside of Seager. I mean, Seager had a rough first month coming back from that sports hernia surgery, but basically since early May, he's been that same runner up to MVP that he was last year. It's just that he's not going to finish runner up to MVP this year with the season Bobby Witt and Aaron Judge and Juan Soto and several other guys are having.
Right.
But it's just been a collective fall off that, time and time again, the last like few months, I've been like, oh, is this win going to be the one that turns it on? Is this going to be the one that turns it on? I mean, they had a good first couple of weeks in July before the All-Star break. And then you know, they lost 2 out of 3 coming out of the All-Star break. They win 5 in a row, but 4 of those are one-run games, and another 4 of them are against the White Sox. And then they decided to be buyers, and then everything fell in the trash can.
Yeah.
So it's like there's only so much time for this team to turn things on. And even though the Twins had a slow start, they didn't take much time to turn it on. I mean, what kind of turned around from those first couple of weeks or month or so where the Twins were looking quite terrible to basically since, I don't know, early May or so, they've been one of the best teams in baseball.
It just everything kind of came together the way it should have. And it wasn't just the worst possible luck at the worst possible times. It felt like every full count pitch was a called third strike, even if it was 6 inches off the plate. And it felt as though everything was dropping in. They'd score 5, they'd give up 6, they'd score 3, they'd give up 4. And it was one of the more frustrating 20 game spans because, Cleveland shot out so well and they were also playing so well on the road, which, you know, all those wins at the beginning of the year on the road, I mean, you bank them up to the point where, hey, you don't have that many road games left. And, for a while there, I don't know if they were like 11-3 on the road or whatever, but you're thinking, okay, well, it's going to take a long time for them to fall under 500 on the road. And most teams, if they can be 500 on the road, are really dang good overall. So it was kind of like, oh man, what if they have a Linsanity run that lasts all season long and the Twins are, just snake bitten all year. No, the 2018 Twins are the team I always fall back on as far as like just never got it going. They had a good team in 17. They added Lance Lynn. They added Logan Morrison, who was coming off a big year. I want to say that was the Marwin Gonzalez year too. Like they added talent and just completely had nothing to show for it. Won 78 games. And the worst thing you can do is win 78 games because you're not good, you're not bad, and you are not interesting at all. And so it felt like that could have been like this team's identity. But you look at the talent and like when the team is fully healthy, you have guys like Trevor Larnach, Alex Kirilloff, Matt Wallner on the periphery of this roster who are former first round picks, big power, big skills, former top 100 guys. And so if I felt good about the depth, like Austin Martin, who was a 5th overall pick and came over in the Jose Barrios trade, at any given moment could be like anywhere from 13th to 15th best position player on this roster when things are going the way they're supposed to. That's a pretty nice player to have on the back of your bench. He makes contact and he can stand in certain defensive spots. He's not much of a defender, but having that kind of depth and flexibility where Willie Castro can play third one day, short the next, and center the next, it gives you kind of a pendulum swing of like, okay, we got all these guys today and we got all these guys today, but we're figuring out how to move around Willie and move around Kyle Farmer when he's playing well and move around, Royce Lewis has moved around a little bit for better or worse. And so the idea and concept of how they built the roster makes sense to me, but it was not coming together early in the season. They're guys who are supposed to hit lefties weren't. Kyle Farmer has had a dreadful season when it comes to that. Manuel Margot he's like 0 for 30 something pinch hitting. And then the rest of his season, he's been just fine. But the Twins use a lot of pinch hitters against lefties and righties, and they play the matchups. I call it shift change, like in hockey. When a righty comes in after a lefty starts, Max Kepler's off the bench, Matt Wallner's off the bench, Trevor Larnach's off the bench. So they do play to matchups, and it just was not clicking early on, and people were getting ticked. And it finally kind of started to catch traction in late April, and they've been one of, if not the best teams in baseball record-wise since then.
Yeah, it's definitely been a case of turning things on at the right time. But speaking of someone who is turning it on, maybe a little bit too late, but good to see some kind of glow up from him these last few weeks of the season is Adolis Garcia. We're talking about his big series, what's been going right for him, and a home run that makes me think he might just be fixed. Right after this word from our sponsors. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then the YouTube TV base plan. You'll also be able to watch every single regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel any single time. There's all kinds of different action you can get in on FanDuel if you wanted to bet on the World Series. The Twins, right now, the 6th favorite to win the World Series behind the Dodgers, Phillies, Yankees, Orioles, and Houston Astros. If you're thinking, you know what? I need a team to watch in the playoffs. I'm wanting to bet on the Minnesota Twins to win their division right now. They're the second favorite. The Guardians right now at -150 to win the AL Central, and the Twins at +175. I'm feeling pretty good about these Twins down the stretch. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Now, the Rangers have had a lot go wrong for them this season, but Adolis Garcia's fall off has been one of the biggest things that has gone wrong for the Rangers in 2024. I mean, last year he was coming off a career best season, an OPS of 836, a career high 39 bombs, his second All-Star appearance, finished 14th in MVP voting, won a Gold Glove, won an ALCS MVP, and had one of the best postseason series and just postseason runs in general that I think I've ever seen a player have. And he started off the year great again this year. In the first month of the season, he had an OPS over 900. I believe it was around 950. Then once the calendar turned to May, he kind of turned into a pumpkin and had been pretty objectively terrible since then. I mean, the defense fell off. The arm, which is one of the strongest in baseball and used to be one of the most accurate, became less accurate. The throws to cut off men were missed. Balls were misplayed. Just all kinds of everything spiraling for him to the point where, I mean, he got a 2-year extension to avoid arbitration. This year, he's making, I believe, $6 million this year, and I think it's $11 million next year. But there was some thought of, okay, what do you do with this guy? Is this the fall off that everybody was talking about? Is this why the Cardinals were okay passing on him? I mean, heck, the Rangers in 2021 DFA'd him out of spring training for Mike Foltynewicz. Mike Foltynewicz in 2021.
Long time.
Yeah, I will always think about him when I think about Adolis Garcia because he had an amazing spring training. I mean, he played a little bit with the Rangers, 3 games in 2020, had a whole 143 OPS in those 7 plate appearances. Very noteworthy stuff in 2020. But the Rangers DFA'd him, and the entire league said, nah, I don't want him. That's fine. You can keep him in your system. The Rangers call him up in around mid-April and he just lights the place up. He's facing off against his best friend Randy Rosarena in Tampa. Had some clutch home runs in extra innings to give the Rangers not only his first MLB home run, but get the Rangers some much needed wins at that point. Became an all-star, finished 4th in the Rookie of the Year voting. The year after wasn't quite as good, wasn't an all-star again, but then in 2023 was an all-star. It felt like, okay, everyone's been waiting for this kind of fall off for this guy because of like, oh, well, his swing decisions were terrible. And, once he loses his athleticism, then he's not going to be as good because, you keep making those bad swing decisions, then that's like, it's just not going to work out for you.
Javier Baez.
Yeah, a little bit. But yeah, without the stellar defense at shortstop.
No, I just mean the general idea of a player who makes their living with wowing you with physical tools. Well, when those tools start to diminish, it gets ugly quick.
It does. And the thing about him last year and his glow up last year was his walk rate jumping up so significantly last season.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the year before his career high walk rate was 6.1%. Last year jumped all the way up to 10.3%. This year it's a little bit down. I mean, quite a bit down at 7.3. Still, not horrible, around 40th percentile. But because he was making those better swing decisions, because he still had that elite athleticism, and he's still been hitting the ball hard all this year, I thought, this is a legit guy. He's been a 3.5 win player, 4-win player last year for 3 seasons now. It's not like this is just some flash in the pan that, was a 2-week stretch where he was hot. Like, this is a legit guy. Yeah. But with his struggles with fastballs this year, that's something that you can't really overlook. But the home run that he hit on Sunday was absolutely electric. Off of Alcala, a 97.9 mile an hour fastball that was on the outer third over the plate, but it was about 2-3 inches above the strike zone. He tomahawks that thing and pulls it to left field and pulls it. That is not something he has done with a pitch lately. I mean, the last couple weeks he has been hitting over 370 with an OPS north of 1,000. I mean, he's got 3 home runs in his last 7 days. He has looked like he is back to the Adolis Garcia the Rangers have needed all season long, who can get hot and kind of, carry an offense by himself, like Corey Seager can do at times. And I'm curious your thoughts as to Adolis Garcia. Is this a guy who you think has, got more left in the tank, or are you thinking that I don't know if he's going to be able to maintain that?
Well, what's always tricky with corner guys, and he's older than people realize. He's in his age 31 season, heading into age 32, and the contract value will go up a little bit. So if you're to shop him this offseason, you're shopping him when he's getting more expensive. Certainly not younger. None of us are getting younger. The defense and offense have both fallen off to the point where he's, below that 2021, preseason DFA situation. And he doesn't have, the defense has fallen off. Fangraphs has almost a 20-run drop-off defensively, which is a huge deal. And for a corner guy, when you fall down the defensive tree, there's not many branches left. And so I think if someone was like, hey, listen, we'll take him, we'll make him our DH, or maybe he does have a rebound defensively, because defensive year-to-year stuff can be a little tricky. I think it would be a really tough spot for the Rangers to say, hey, we're going to make a move here and have it work out well for them, because for, however many $1 million saved, reinvesting it into something that's for sure going to be better is going to be a risky proposition. And so I think you just got to kind of take your lumps, hope it was an off year, and pull for the best. And, in the meantime, he's striking out less than ever before, which is at least somewhat of a positive. And you just hope he finds some of that power, because I don't think the walks are coming back, but I think you could maybe sneakily get that power back. And at the same time, though, I don't think there's a way to move him that makes any sense for the Rangers.
Yeah, I think if you were going to trade him, you would have to do it after, that ALCS that he had last year before you signed that 2-year deal. But I mean,
which would be a terrible optic.
Emotionally, how do you do that? A guy who just won you the World Series, you can't do that.
Terrible optics. PrizePicks.
You absolutely cannot do that. I
The
mean,
Twins did that with Tom Brunansky and got back Tom Herr, and it was a disaster back in the 80s. Disaster.
I mean, if you knew that Evan Carter was going to come back and be healthy and also hit lefties, then that's a different story. And
Yep.
you have your outfield of Leote in center and Wyatt Langford in left and Evan Carter in right. And then you've
It's a good outfield.
yeah, that's a good outfield. But is that outfield going to be healthy and producing at a level that you would expect for a team that has championship aspirations? Because one thing that Chris Young said in spring training this year was last year was great. Winning a World Series was amazing. It's the goal every year, but we are not defined by what we did last year. We are defined about who we are moving forward. And so far, it hasn't quite been as flattering as just saying, we're defined by last year. We won a World Series. That was really awesome. Let's hope we can do it
If
again.
you're not careful with that, you're picking Robbie Grossman off the scrap heap, and he's playing more than you want him to. So it's tricky.
You know, Robbie Grossman has been better than I expected. He's still got a 345 OBP, and I promised that I would stop, mashing on Robbie Grossman because he is a World Series champ and deserves that level of respect. He does still hit lefties, and he hits that's it.
Takes his walks and hits lefties.
He does. He does not play defense. He does not hit righties. He does not really hit for power, but he is a World Series champ, which I will forever be grateful for him. But I am not grateful for this series. An absolute disaster, a nice little cherry sundae on top of the already terrible second half for the Rangers. But hey, if it can't be good for my team, I'm at least glad a team that I have good feelings for is feeling good about themselves moving forward, able to take 3 out of 4, and the Rangers able to have some fun on Sunday and salvage something out of what has been a pretty not great series. But this crossover, unlike the series, was very, very fun for me and Rangers fans. Brandon, thank you so much for joining, y'all. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy World Series champion Texas Rangers baseball.